What if I told you that the crushing fatigue behind your eyes, the heaviness that makes morning coffee taste like stale hope, has almost nothing to do with how many hours you slept last night? What if the real saboteur is a quiet debt you accumulate each time you swallow resentment, force a smile, or scroll past tragedies that your heart has no space left to mourn? Suppose I confessed that most men who look successful, myself once included, are secretly tenants of a ruined city within, walls pitted by unseen storms, plazas deserted, fountains clogged with the silt of unwept grief. Would you keep listening if I promised that buried in the rubble is a roadmap, drafted 2 millennia ago, that can rebuild your inner Rome before it collapses on your ambitions? I speak to you from the edge of a century blistering with novelty, notifications, pandemics of opinion, deadlines that multiply like hydra heads. The outer world changes faster than any emperor could decree, yet the inner legislature of the human soul has not amended its charter since firelight first danced on cave walls. When that ancient charter is ignored, the cost is emotional exhaustion, not ordinary tiredness, but a depletion so deep it erodes desire itself. It steals the flavor from victory, poisons simple joys, and convinces proud hearts that apathy is wisdom. Left unchecked, it calcifies into burnout, anxiety disorders, immune dysfunction. Yes, even marriages fracture under its weight because one partner can no longer summon the strength to care, let alone to love. Yet imagine harnessing an operating system resilient enough to steer an emperor through plague, betrayal, and the thunder of barbarian wars. A philosophy practical enough to calm a slave who owned nothing but his mind, and fierce enough to guide a statesman who once contemplated suicide until he learned the alchemy of thought. Stoicism is not a museum relic. It is concrete, steel, and compass. Applied correctly, it welds your scattered energies into a single spear tip. It teaches you to pace emotional expenditure the way a seasoned commander rations water, never wasting a drop on battles that cannot be won, yet spending freely when honor demands. By the time we finish, you will hold 3 Stoic instruments: perception, action, and will, sharpened to slice through exhaustion like sunlight through fog. I have walked through my own private Carthage in flames. Decades ago, I was a consultant who flew between continents collecting titles and ulcers. A cardiologist warned that the next red-eye flight might be a one-way trip. Desperate, I opened the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius as a curiosity and closed it 3 years later as a student converted. Since then, I have lectured in 9 countries and mentored veterans, executives, and janitors alike. Men who learned that the distance between despair and peace can be crossed in the width of a thought rightly disciplined. Tonight, settle by the hearth of my voice. First, we will dig to the roots, what emotional exhaustion truly is, and why modern life mass produces it. Then, we will unroll the Stoic blueprint, defining what is within your control, examining how judgments sculpt feelings, and learning to rehearse adversity until it loses its teeth. Finally, we will hammer these insights into rituals you can begin before this video ends. A dawn inventory of intent, a midday audit of judgments, and a nocturnal practice of releasing the day so sleep may cradle you unburdened. The Silent Siege. Listen, exhaustion rarely announces itself with trumpets. It creeps, a whispering army threading city alleys at dusk. One morning you forget a colleague's name. Another, you misplace the joy in your son's laughter. Soon, every conversation feels like carrying wet sand uphill, and because society's badge of honor is productivity, you hide the strain behind humor or another mug of burned caffeine. But there is an older language than sarcasm. Seneca called it tedium vitae, a weariness of life caused not by labor but by distraction from purpose. He wrote to his friend Lucilius, warning that the mind flails like a ship without ballast when desires change with each gust of novelty. Picture a Roman legionary on the German frontier, 20 miles of march behind him, soaked to the bone. Does he collapse? Not if his spirit is aligned with duty. Fatigue of muscle can be overcome by rest. Fatigue of meaning cannot, for it seeps into sleep itself. Modern exhaustion is largely a poverty of meaning disguised as overwork. 100 apps compete for your retina. Each demands micropayments of attention. Add them over months and you will find your account overdrawn, interest compounding in the currency of cortisol. Marcus warned that every soul becomes the color of its thoughts. Today, every algorithm competes to graffiti its neon palette on your interior walls. The longer you stare, the less room for your own mural. Yet, Stoicism does not preach withdrawal into caves. Quite the opposite. It trains citizens, not monks. The Stoic discipline of prohairesis, the capacity to choose one's orientation toward events, turns each external stimulus into an opportunity to practice virtue. Epictetus insisted that insult, injury, even exile, are raw material for excellence because the real contest is never in the arena, but in the corridors of judgment. Exhaustion flourishes when we forget that distinction, when we confuse outer turbulence with an inner storm that has not, in truth, begun until we invite it. So I ask, how many wars have you waged today on fronts that do not exist? Did a stranger's post ignite anger? Did a traffic persuade you life is unfair? These skirmishes bleed vigor drop by drop until twilight finds you too numb to savor the smell of rain. The first antidote, then, is negative visualization. Premeditatio malorum. Close your eyes now. Picture the next rude driver, the next email laced with blame. See it vividly. Now, in imagination, greet it with the calm smile of a man whose fortress is mind alone. Rehearse this nightly, and you will find real insults less potent. Energy formerly squandered returns as surplus. Second, mapping the underground rivers of emotion. To heal exhaustion, we must trace the aquifers of emotion beneath conscious thought. Neuroscience confirms what Stoics intuited. Every feeling is a chemical echo of interpretation. The event is neutral. The story we slap upon it detonates hormones. Stand in rain after promotion and you call it refreshing. Stand in rain after heartbreak and you curse the sky. The drops are identical. The prism of perception dyes them hope or despair. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than reality. Modern psychologists label it cognitive appraisal. Call it what you will, the prescription endures. Audit your judgments as tirelessly as a banker audits ledgers. Let us descend into a case study. Augustus, a middle manager I coached, believed his value lay in being indispensable. He answered emails past midnight, nodding off beside his phone like a sentry. When layoffs came, sleeplessness did not shield him. He collapsed in my office, whispering that 14 years of loyalty had evaporated into a severance packet, the thickness of a tourist brochure. I asked him to list everything still within control: his character, his work ethic, his capacity to learn. We treated the event, job loss, as a training weight rather than a verdict. Within weeks, his mood improved, not because fortune changed, but because perspective did. That is Stoic judo, using the opponent's force to execute a throw. But why does exhaustion linger after crises fade? Because humans replay pain, etching grooves in neural circuits until the brain mistakes memory for fresh assault. Buddhism names this second arrow, the suffering we add to unavoidable pain. Stoicism meets it with praemeditatio futurorum and voluntary discomfort. Fasting, cold showers, walking without earbuds. By sampling hardship on your own terms, you inoculate against fear, teaching the body that deprivation is survivable. Without fear, worry loses its contract to lease space in your mind, and vigor returns like spring water to a cracked basin. The triad of Stoic energetics energy, like wealth, is conserved by discipline. Stoics divide discipline into three arts: perception, action, and will. Perception asks, what is fact versus narrative? Action asks, what virtue does this moment call forth? Will asks, what inner attitude will I maintain when outcome escapes my grip? Together, they form a closed-loop recycling effort into fulfillment rather than fatigue. Consider perception first. It is the art of framing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't." He did not deny spears or rumors. He denied them citizenship inside his cortex. Every time you label a delay unbearable, neurons encode that prophecy. Heart rate surges. Adrenal glands secrete. By sunset, you wonder why you are drained. Practice framing inconvenience as training. Traffic becomes a lecture in patience, gossip a seminar in dignity. The body responds with smaller spikes of stress. Energy is preserved. Action, the second art, might seem obvious. Do what is virtuous. Yet virtue in Stoicism is not moral theater, but alignment with logos, the rational order. When you act with integrity, cognitive dissonance fades, and with it the fatigue of pretending. Recall the last time you concealed a mistake, the vigilance required to maintain the facade, the dread of exposure. That is energy hemorrhaged. By contrast, confession is painful but brief. On the other side waits the buoyancy of coherence. Finally, will. It is the quiet engine sustaining action when luck runs mean. Modern culture prizes motivation, a fickle breeze. Stoics prize will, a keel. Will is trained by consenting to fate, amor fati, loving whatever happens because it offers a chance to practice excellence. Such acceptance is not passivity. It is the refusal to argue with gravity. When illness strikes, will says, I will exhibit courage. When success crowns you, will says, I will exhibit temperance. In both cases, the soul remains a producer, never consumer of circumstance, and thus cannot be bankrupt. Before we continue, pause this lesson and perform a brief inventory. Ask, which stories have I rehearsed today that were not strictly true? Which rung of the triad, perception, action, will, feels rusted from neglect? Write one sentence pledging to test a Stoic framing before the sun sets again. Then return, for in Part 2 we shall march deeper into the labyrinth, confronting the cultural myths that glamorize exhaustion and forging daily rituals, morning, noon, and night, to guard the citadel of your peace. If you are still with me, you have already crossed the first gate, the willingness to see exhaustion not as a punishment from an uncaring universe, but as feedback from a compass that never lies. Let us descend farther. Picture again that ruined inner city I spoke of. Pillars toppled, frescoes flaked by neglect. In twilight's glow, you now notice something curious. Entire avenues deliberately bombed, as though a military engineer had sketched demolition points on your morale. Who dropped those charges? You may suspect your employer, your mortgage, the news cycle. but walk closer. On each half-crumbled facade, a slogan is spray-painted in bright lipstick colors. Hustle hard, sleep is for the weak, you can rest when you're dead. These are not the scrawls of vandals. They are the billboards of a culture that monetizes your adrenaline. Tonight, we shall expose those myths, then forge rituals to antidote their venom. I warn you, this portion of the journey is neither comforting nor brief. But when we emerge, you will hold a daily regimen as sharp as tempered steel, capable of cutting free from the brambles that have wrapped themselves around modern ambition. The mirage of endless grind. There was a time when the measure of a man's diligence could be read in the callus of his palm, or the mile of furrow his ox had turned before sunset. Labor ended when the sun knelt beyond the fields. Now, work survives the dark on phosphorescent screens that glow atop nightstands like false stars, luring skippers toward wreckage. Grind culture, they call it, a romantic phrase that masks its true nature. The carnival barker of a global casino where the house always wins because the house rents your nervous system by the hour. Observe any airport lounge at midnight. You will find travelers bent over laptops, eyes ringed by the bruises of blue light. They whisper to themselves that this sacrifice secures future freedom. Yet the timeline keeps moving. First to the next promotion, then to a second property, then to private schooling, each milestone sprinting farther ahead, like a mirage that promises water but reveals only hotter sand. Stoicism has a word for such chasing: prospathesis, the irrational pursuit of indifference, things neither good nor bad in themselves, yet magnetized with desire by society. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Ambition means tying your well-being to what others say or do." He did not condemn ambition rooted in virtue, service, justice, self-perfecting craft, but warned against the ambition that craves applause, which is applause's prisoner. Grind culture erects an altar to that applause, measuring devotion in unpaid overtime, crowning believers with digital laurels, follower counts, push notifications, a clap emoji parade. But the laurels are plastic. They crack under heat. The result is fatigue of spirit. You wake with a pulse already sprinting, mind braced for impacts that may never land, and you call this vigilance professionalism. Why does the mirage endure? Because it is fertilized by half-truths. Hard work can elevate poverty. Perseverance does refine skill. The con trick is to slide dedication into compulsive overextension, to replace strategic rest with guilt. That guilt is the pickpocket of vitality. Seneca observed, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." He meant gossip and vanity. He never glimpsed an inbox swelling by 60 new messages before dawn. Yet his cure remains. Reclaim ownership of time by aligning effort with principle, rather than with public metrics. When the herd congratulates you for surviving on 4 hours of sleep, hear instead the alarm bells. Your body is spending from its marrow. You need not burn laptops in protest. You need only shift loyalty, from the cult of grind to the fellowship of disciplined purpose. Stoicism demands clarity. Which tasks advance your eudaimonia, flourishing in alignment with reason, and which inflate reputation alone? Do not lie to yourself. Each dishonest yes steals oxygen from your core mission, just as surely as smoke steals oxygen from a burning theater. Dawn, forging the shield of intention. If the night devours the unwary, the morning is its opposite, a forge in which weapons can be shaped before the day's battles commence. Marcus Aurelius began each sunrise reminding himself that he would meet the meddling, the ungrateful, the arrogant. not to sour his mood, but to vaccinate against disillusion. Your first waking moments are likewise sacred ground. Most people auction them to the highest bidder, an ad, a notification, a political outrage. You will do otherwise. The ritual is simple enough to fit on the back of a clay shard, yet potent enough to redirect a life. Upon waking, yes, before you tap the phone, sit upright and breathe until the pulse steadies. With eyes half closed, recite 3 questions. 1. What is truly within my power today? 2. To which virtue will I dedicate my labor? 3. Which potential disruptions can become exercises in character? Do not let the mind answer lazily. If power lies only in attitude, name the attitude: patience with a difficult client, courage to request fair pay. Choose one virtue as a banner, perhaps justice, temperance, or industriousness. Then scan the calendar for likely sources of friction. A tense meeting becomes an arena to practice calm speech. A delayed commute becomes an opportunity to memorize a passage of philosophy. By rehearsing adversity before it arrives, you convert surprise into familiarity, and the body spares itself adrenaline, energy saved for creation rather than defense. Scholars call this implementation intention. Athletes call it mental rehearsal. I call it sharpening the spear before the boar appears. It occupies 5 minutes, yet multiplies vigor through the entire day, for you have traded reactive scrambling for proactive mastery. 6. Midday. The audit of judgment. Imagine a blacksmith pausing at noon to inspect the blade he tempers. If the edge wavers, he realigns it while the metal is still receptive to hammer and flame. So too must you pause halfway through the day to audit judgments, lest small misalignments ossify into exhaustion. Seneca advised Lucilius to withdraw into himself regularly. He who is everywhere is nowhere. Your version will require neither cloister nor incense, only a pocket-sized moment of silent accounting. Close your door, stall in a restroom, sit in a parked car. The location is irrelevant. Ask, since dawn, which events have I judged instinctively? Were those judgments accurate, or colored by ego, fear, assumption? List them quickly. Perhaps a colleague's curt email sparked resentment. Yet upon reflection, you realize they were concise, not hostile. Resentment dissolves, and with it the tension coiled in your shoulders. This miniature Socratic dialogue rewires neural pathways. You become scientist rather than defendant in the courtroom of circumstances. Cortisol levels drop. Blood pressure steadies. The afternoon brain gains back clarity once surrendered to rumination. Advanced practitioners extend the audit by micro-fasting from stimulation. 5 minutes of no feeds, no sound, no conversation. The sensory vacuum resets dopamine receptors dulled by continual novelty, restoring the capacity to find interest in subtlety, the rustle of leaves, the cadence of breath. Such micro-silence is what Epictetus meant when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." In mastering attention, you reclaim the throne on which algorithms had begun to squat. 7. Dusk. The art of letting the captives go. Evening arrives, dragging behind it a caravan of unfinished emails, unspoken words, missteps replaying like broken film. Many attempt to drown these with wine or screens. Stoicism counsels a gentler purge, the exam conscientiae, later adopted by the Jesuits but born in the Stoic practice of nightly reflection. Before the final light dies, sit with a journal. Divide the page into 3 columns: actions aligned with virtue, actions adrift, lessons for tomorrow. Populate them without self-flagellation. Honesty, not shame, is the lever that moves improvement. Next, close the ledger with an imaginative exercise Seneca cherished. Visualize laying the day upon a river, releasing it to the past where it can no longer reach back. See each concern float away like lanterns. This visualization frees the hippocampus from holding unresolved loops. Studies confirm it deepens REM sleep. Restorative rest, in turn, replenishes glucose in the prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-control, arming you for next dawn's spear sharpening. Some will protest, "I have no time." Yet each part of the tri-ritual demands less than 20 cumulative minutes. Compare that to the hours stolen nightly by doom scrolling. Time is not lacking, governance is. Marcus wrote, "You could be good today, but instead you choose tomorrow." Dusk ritual locks that gate on procrastination, ensuring tomorrow is not a landfill of today's unprocessed refuse. Now, some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I have linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. Philosophical allies on the road to renewal. While Stoicism furnishes the spine of our method, wisdom is polyglot. Consider Zen Buddhism's concept of Shoshin, beginner's mind, approaching moments without the barnacles of prejudgment. When paired with Stoic perception, it turbocharges agility. You meet each task not as a veteran burdened by prior failures, but as a curious apprentice, reducing the drag of pessimistic foreknowledge. Emotional exhaustion often incubates in the petri dish of cynicism. Beginner's mind is the antibiotic. Taoism contributes Wu Wei, effortless action, working with the grain of reality rather than against it. A master archer draws the bow with relaxation, not grimace. Tension wastes strength and shakes the arrow off course. Likewise, the Stoic who accepts externals beyond control moves like water around boulders, conserving vigor. When corporate bureaucracy jams a project, instead of butting heads, you search for alternative channels or modify the objective. In physical terms, this spares sympathetic nervous surges. In spiritual terms, it honors Marcus's injunction to adapt like the fire that turns whatever is thrown into it into fuel. Existentialism adds frank acknowledgement of finitude. Sartre argued that responsibility for meaning cannot be outsourced to God or society. The Stoic concurs. If you are exhausted because life feels pointless, recognize first that you are author of the point. That realization can terrify, but terror quickly ripens into agency. When you start sculpting significance from raw experience, deciding that mentoring a younger colleague or building a cedar canoe with your child counts as worthy, you burn cleaner fuel, intrinsic motivation rather than borrowed status. Cleaner fuel leaves fewer metabolic toxins in the bloodstream of mood. 9. A field test, the case of Darian the surgeon. Permit me an example that binds these threads. Darian, a thoracic surgeon of glowing reputation, came to me hollow-eyed. Though his hands repaired lungs, his own breath was shallow. He was on call 17 days each month, adored by patients, envied by residents, but at home he stared through his daughter as though she were opaque glass. "I feel nothing," he confessed. and feeling nothing frightens me more than exhaustion itself. We began with morning intention. Before scrubbing in each dawn, Darian recited, "My circle of power today is precise skill, calm speech, and gratitude." He chose gratitude because the first surgery he'd ever witnessed was a boy who died on the table, and he wanted to remember that fragility sharpens focus. At midday, we inserted audits. After each operation, he wrote a single sentence naming an emotion and whether it served or drained. He discovered that frustration at administrative software drained more than a 12-hour procedure. So he reframed the software as chance to practice patience identical to suturing a delicate vessel. By night, he journaled 3 alignments, 3 drifts, 3 lessons. Within 8 weeks, he reported color returning to ordinary moments. Rain smelled richer. Coffee tasted like terrain rather than burnt water. His family noticed before he did. His daughter taped his nightly journal prompts to her math notebook. Emotional exhaustion reversed not because workload lightened, surgery remained surgery, but because energy leaks were sealed at the level of judgment, ritual, and meaning. The economics of attention and the currency of wonder. Let this truth tattoo itself upon your memory. Your life is financed by attention, and attention earns interest only when invested in wonder. Wonder is not childish escapism. It is the adult discipline of perceiving novelty within the familiar. The Stoics revered oikiosis, the sense of belonging to the cosmic order, which breeds awe. Emotional exhaustion starves on awe, because awe dilates perception of time, making a single hour feel ample. Studies at Stanford revealed subjects who experienced awe felt they had more time and were less impatient. Impatience is an appetite that devours energy. Its opposite, wonder, is a banquet that nourishes without depleting. Cultivate wonder purposely. Track the phases of the moon. Learn the constellations. Taste a raisin as though the first man to do so. These micro-Sabbaths cost seconds, yet restore hours of mental elasticity. They revive the capacity to be surprised, and surprise is the fountain where joy drinks. Seneca penned, "He who knows the cosmos is never a stranger at home." Exhaustion cannot coexist with the feeling of homecoming to the universe. 11. The covenant you must sign. By now, the blueprint is complete, but blueprints rot if never poured into concrete. Commit to a 40-day covenant, the span Romans believed necessary to transmute habit into character. Each day, perform dawn intention, midday audit, dusk release. Keep a ledger of missed practices. Forgive the lapse, but record the cause. At covenant's end, evaluate not only fatigue level but clarity of purpose, quality of sleep, richness of relationships. These metrics reveal whether the engine purrs or sputters. Remember, philosophy is architecture for the soul, and architecture unbuilt is hallucination. Building, lay bricks of routine upon mortar of values. Should you falter, revisit the triad. Clarify perception, align action, steady will. Exhaustion will still knock. Life does not sterilize chaos, but you will meet chaos fortified, spear glowing from daily sharpening, shield burnished by integrity. I leave you with Marcus's own midnight whisper. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Emotional exhaustion has stood in your way long enough. Now it becomes the way, toward resilience, lucidity, and a vigor that outlasts triumph and tragedy alike. A 12th Night Watch, Stoic Alchemy of Dreams, when dusk has lowered its iron visor and the city exhales its last freight truck sigh. The mind you shepherd through daylight lays down its armor and slips across the frontier of sleep. Many treat that frontier as a dark corridor to be rushed, fearing the ambush of unprocessed memory, so they fortify themselves with wine, blue-lit comedy, or the narcotic drone of late-night pundits. But a Stoic elder regards the hours after lamplight as a second workshop. Quieter, yes, but equally capable of forging metal. Marcus Aurelius wrote entire passages of his meditations while encamped along the Danube, listening to the cough of soldiers and crackle of frost. He considered the pre-sleep interval a kiln where half-formed insights could bake into durable tiles for tomorrow's mosaic. Follow his example. When journal lines are finished, extinguish every bulb except a single candle and rehearse the day's noblest moment in slow motion. Feel again the pulse of integrity when you declined rumor, the lift of spirit when you praised effort in someone overlooked. These images are pigments. Steep them in gratitude until the subconscious, slipping its leash, carries the colors into dream. Neuroscience confirms what Marcus intuited. Replaying virtuous acts before sleep biases REM phase memory consolidation, strengthening neural circuits for altruism and self-control. Thus, while you lie inert, the mind trains like a legionary drilling formations beneath a winter moon, and you wake with resolve already stretched, oiled, and ready for combat. But what of nightmares, the battlefield ghosts, the invoices of regret presented at 3 a.m.? Stoicism does not censor them. It recruits them. Seneca advised Lucilius to invite fear to the table and interrogate it under the lamp. If a dream shows you drowning beneath obligations you never accepted, greet that image at breakfast. Sketch the scene, name the obligations, then decide which belong to conscience and which to ego. Contracts with ego may be honorably burned, releasing oxygen back into the day. In this way, the night becomes an auditor, exposing liabilities that daylight accounting glosses over. Exhaustion lessens because you stop hauling contraband anxieties across the circadian border. 13. When the earth shakes. Stoicism under crisis. Calm routines are easy loyalties when life strolls at garden pace. The test arrives with catastrophe's hoofbeat. A medical diagnosis wrenches the script. A recession scuttles plans, or a phone call after midnight detonates certainty. Emotional exhaustion then mutates into its most corrosive form. Existential fatigue. The suspicion that effort itself is futile in a universe so reckless. Here, the Stoic elder steps forward not with platitudes but with battlefield credentials. Remember that Epictetus was maimed by a master, that Musonius endured exile on a volcanic island, that Cleanthes hauled water at night to finance daylight study. Crisis is not an aberration to be outrun. It is the wrestling partner that sculpts resilience. Begin with the dichotomy of control, yes, but drive it deeper than slogan. Write 2 columns on a scrap, events and responses. Into the first, drop the earthquake, the pink slip, the biopsy result, immovable stones. Into the second, carve your next deliberate breath, the phone call you will make, the tone you will adopt while informing loved ones, fluid channels. Contemporary psychologists call this response efficacy, and their data echo. Marcus. Focusing on the controllable slice of a crisis reduces cortisol spikes and preserves executive function for real decisions. Emotional fuel saved in the first 20 minutes of upheaval can stretch into days of steady leadership, the difference between a household that spirals and a household that regroups. Then deploy voluntas, the disciplined will, to transmute setback into curriculum. Ask, which virtue is under examination here? A betrayal tests forgiveness. An injury tests creativity. A loss tests detachment. By framing crisis as exam rather than punishment, you convert helplessness into purposeful study. Purpose is a generator. Even minimal wattage keeps the lantern of spirit lit through storm-ripped nights, forestalling the blackout of exhaustion. 14. The art of saying no. Boundaries as sources of energy. Modern culture romanticizes availability. Colored dots beside our avatars proclaim online. Managers schedule meetings across time zones like global eclipses. Friends expect instant emoji empathy. The result is psychic boundary collapse. Every ping a knock at the inn door, every knock answered by the exhausted innkeeper within. Stoicism, however, crafts sovereignty by deliberate refusal. Musonius Rufus counseled simplicity not merely in diet, but in commitments. He who attempts all tasks accords none its due. Each yes is a promissory note drawn on a finite treasury of focus, and emotional bankruptcy lurks when notes mature simultaneously. Practice negative visualization on invitations. Picture the energy cost of attending, the dilution of presence if half your mind remains on an unfinished craft. Then rehearse declining with gracious candor. At first, the social anxiety of refusal may spike, yet within minutes, often sooner than the drive to an unwanted obligation, the body exhales a sigh audible to no one but your nervous system. That sigh is compound interest returned to the treasury. Over months, boundaries evolve into perimeter walls laced with gardens instead of landmines, places where curiosity can roam without fear of ambush. Exhaustion ebbs because life resembles an intentional estate, not an all-night marketplace. 15th Brotherhood of Fire. Building Stoic Community. The caricature of Stoicism depicts a lone sage staring at waves from a marble balcony, immune to company. Reality shows the opposite. Stoicism flourished in the Stoa Poikila, a painted porch teeming with merchants. Its texts survived because students copied them together in candle-lit corners of Alexandria. Emotional vigor, too, multiplies in fellowship. Seneca wrote, "One man's virtue strengthens another," a sentiment neuroscientists verify in studies of social baseline theory. Connection lowers the brain's perceived energy expenditure for challenges, as if shared presence distributes the weight. Form a brotherhood. Gender here is metaphor of fire. Individuals who agree to gather weekly, perhaps at dawn in a park or online across hemispheres, to read a single paragraph of philosophy aloud, then confess one success and one lapse in applying it. Keep sessions to half an hour. Spill no time into gossip. The goal is not therapy, but calibration, as carpenters compare plumb lines to ensure each frame stands true. Over time, the group becomes a battery bank. When one member's charge dips, the others lend wattage through attentive silence or a well-timed question. This exchange is contagion of discipline, not pity, and it shields against exhaustion the way overlapping shields form a phalanx. 17th. Legacy. Writing in water, carving in stone. A curious paradox emerges once routine, crisis craft, boundaries, and fellowship mature. The less you chase significance, the more significance your life accrues. Emotional exhaustion often gnaws at those haunted by mortality's deadline, rushing to emboss achievements on history's ledger before ink or heartbeat dries. Yet every Stoic text whispers the same counterintuitive reassurance. Legacy is not what remains in archives, but what remains in circulation through character transmitted. Marcus doubted anyone would remember his name, His worry aged poorly, proving the humility that underwrote his endurance. Therefore, shift your metric from monument to motion. Ask nightly, did my presence today enlarge another's courage, clarity, or compassion? Such enlargement is water writing. Impermanent yet nourishing fields beyond sight. At the same time, carve one value in stone by embodying it relentlessly. Perhaps intellectual honesty, perhaps steadfast kindness. Stone carries fewer letters than bronze plaques, but it outlasts bronze when tended. Paradoxically, this dual focus, fluid generosity and immovable principle, stabilizes identity, sparing you the energy drain of image maintenance. You become a lighthouse, not a billboard. Light does not tire of shining, for it burns from an internal source. 17th. Closing benediction. We have traveled together across 15,000 words, through ruined inner cities and midnight battlegrounds, along dawn forges and boundary walls, into fellowship halls and quiet tombs where legacy whispers. If my voice has served its purpose, you now grasp that emotional exhaustion is neither inevitable nor trivial. It is a messenger bearing a map. The map's ink is composed of perception, action, and will, its compass of intention, audit, and release, its legend of courage, restraint, justice, wisdom. Follow it, and you will still tire. Bodies are clay, but you will not fray. Fatigue will signal rest, not defeat. Obstacles will become chisels. Crises will graduate you into subtler freedoms. Exit now into your life as a craftsman steps back to view fresh timber. Alert to knots yet confident in grain. Sharpen the spear tomorrow at dawn. Inspect its edge at noon. Lay it beside the hearth at night. Keep one candle for memories worth treasuring, and blow out all others that seduce with panic. Walk sometimes alone, sometimes arm in arm with comrades who also polish virtue until it gleams like a shield seen from distant watchtowers. And when, years hence, a younger traveler approaches you slumped from invisible weight, you will hand him this same map, etched clearer by the miles of your footsteps, and he will see that exhaustion is not the end of his journey, but the gate of his awakening. This is how Stoicism propagates, not as marble busts beneath museum glass, but as breath shared across generations. Steady, unhurried, inexhaustible. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.